Tonight on the HawksZone Rundown, one of our favorite beat writers, one of our favorite guests actually altogether, Gregg Bell from the Tacoma News Tribune, back joining us again. Awesome time to have Greg on. Minicamp's done, OTA's done, and we're leading into camp, so it's just a real good time to have Greg on and kind of get his overall perspective on how this offseason sort of went up to this point. With all the moves starting from DK and Gino out the door to the draft, to OTAs. And, Greg's just going to break it all down for us. We're going to talk camp battles, who he's looking forward to seeing the most. And we're going to get into that quarterback room as well. Get Greg's thoughts on how that's shaping up and just how he likes the outlook of that room moving into the future too. So all that, a lot more coming up with Gregg Bell on the other side. Guys, before that, make sure you go down and you subscribe to the channel for us. Really helps the channel. Share the videos, like the videos, all that helps. And we appreciate everybody that's been supporting the channel thus far. And you can also go down, buy us a coffee, links in the description. So guys, on the other side, Gregg Bell.
So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about
Man, let's go. It's go time, baby.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You ready to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Defense trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Can't chase it. What a catch! Jackson Smith and
Are you kidding me?
Baldwin. Oh my goodness, he caught it.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with your hosts, Ryan and Bryce.
Gregg Bell back on the show, joining us once again from the Tacoma News Tribune. Greg, it's awesome having you on again. Obviously a slow time of the year, but you've been just back from minicamp and OTAs, so it's awesome having you on to talk Hawks. We appreciate you coming back on.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Bryce. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, this is my favorite. Well, one of my favorite times of the year before it gets all wild.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's the thing, right? Everybody's sort of, the draft's over, free agency's over, mini camp's over. Now you're kind of just waiting to get on the field and get down to business. But, just kind of kicking it off as a whole, we haven't had you on in a while and we haven't really talked the offseason, but, overall, just give us a quick offseason rundown from what you've seen from kind of the start of the offseason to, now, and just how things have sort of evolved, especially with Mike Macdonald now being kind of, he's had that full real offseason going into year two. So just kind of give us your overall assessment of the offseason.
Well, it was a giant shift from where they were at the end of January, where the last game against the Rams. I mean, they went out of the last season thinking that they had to give a new contract to their franchise quarterback, Geno Smith, and they had a $100 million contract staring them in the face about DK Metcalf. And then they took those two decisions and put them on its head in March and decided to go in a completely different direction at both positions. And that really has charted its entire new course on offense. So the offseason changed midstream. Once Geno Smith asked for $40+ million a year, they pivoted so quickly because they were only a couple of days from the start of free agency. They pivoted quickly so they could get Sam Darnold before someone else did. They trade Geno Smith to Pete Carroll. Then they trade DK Metcalf, who I think what it came down to, guys, was a player who said he didn't want to be here anymore or would like to explore opportunities elsewhere, and a coach, Mike Macdonald, who said, okay, fine, out of here. If you don't want to be here, we don't want you. And he didn't have the relationship with Metcalf that Pete Carroll did. He didn't have the history with him, never took off his shirt at the combine in a meeting room with him. So if a player said he didn't want to be here, Macdonald's answer was, see ya. And that was a lot different than how Pete Carroll would have handled that situation. I would submit that the Geno Smith situation was a lot different with Mike Macdonald than it would have been had it been with Pete Carroll. So right away, they changed midstream, and therefore I think it changed how they drafted. It changed how the rest of free agency went because the bulk of their money went to Sam Darnold. That was their big ticket acquisition. So having judged that from that point forward of going with Darnold and signing Cooper Kupp, I think the other thing that stood out this offseason was how much more comfortable and dominant Mike Macdonald's way is with the Seahawks now. This time last year, he was relying almost exclusively on John Schneider and the personnel staff word about scouting, player acquisition, drafting, signing. the personnel front office side of the house had that last year because the coaching side of the house was still moving in. They hadn't even gotten done and hired the 23-man staff when the draft went off last year. And all the pre-draft run-up at free agency all happened while Macdonald was still hiring coaches. He didn't even have a training plan ready, let alone know exactly who he wanted to play at what positions. Now that we've seen them in a season, they've seen moves like getting rid of both their starting inside linebackers right in the middle of the season and bringing in a new one in Ernest Jones. You can see now Mike Macdonald's imprint on this team. The fact that they are going out and drafting defensive backs, signing more defensive backs in the case of Shaquille Griffin, the fact that they are committed on defense to Ernest Jones now for at least 3 more years, the imprints of this team is so much more Mike Macdonald's than it was this time last year. And the third thing, guys, is we saw something in the draft that I wasn't sure and Seahawks fans weren't sure was going to happen. They finally changed their philosophy on the offensive line. They finally drafted an interior offensive lineman, the highest drafted guard since Steve Hutchinson, the Hall of Famer in 2001 in Gray Zabel. They finally listened to their coaching staff. They brought in new coaches, 2 coaches on the offensive line, Rick Dennison and John Bent, with a combined 47 years of offensive line coaching in the NFL. And they let them decide at the top of the draft that we were going to draft a guard. They're going to let the offensive line coaches dictate how they coach. What system is going to be outside zone, one clear system, not a potpourri of systems and styles that it was last season, not this all kinds of pulling and inside zone and outside. No, it's outside zone, wide zone that Clint Kubiak and his staff have brought in. So there's a much more clarity, especially on offense. And on defense, they understand Mike Macdonald's system so much better than they did a year ago. Those are all the progress points that they've made since the end of last season. A lot of change.
Yeah, no, Greg, that's a lot of change to go through. And that was going to kind of lead to the second topic I wanted to bring up with you, which is Mike Macdonald in year 2. Like you said, this really has his imprints now on this organization. He's much more comfortable being here and being in charge. And being at minicamp and even through the draft process, was how much more prevalent was that? And how different is it than how Pete operated when you watch Pete go through that process with John to now?
Well, Macdonald is just so much more assertive, and he's just more comfortable on the field. You see him talking with the offensive players. You see him in the offensive drills more than you did last year. Last year, he pretty much just stuck himself on defense at practices, called the defense, and never went to the offense. He left it up to Ryan Grubb, and we saw what happened in the results of that. This year, he's spending the first parts of practices so far anyway, the offseason practices with the offense. He has delegated some of the practice play calling responsibility to Aiden Dirty, the defensive coordinator, who really isn't the defensive coordinator because he doesn't call the plays during games. But he has ceded some, it seems to me, some responsibility and time at practice on defense to Dirty while he's been on the offensive side. So that's a tangible difference on the field I've noticed already. How it relates to the Pete Carroll, the biggest change now with the Seahawks is you had at that time, Pete Carroll, you had a head coach who was the ultimate authority on the players. So when Pete Carroll decided something, then a player stayed or left. I go back to the Russell Wilson trade. Pete Carroll was the last man on the face of the earth who was convinced that Russell Wilson was going to be traded. He thought he was going to fix Russell Wilson's relationship with the team. He believed that Russell Wilson would stay. He thought Wilson's best place was to be here. And only after he flew Wilson to his home in Hawaii and talked to him face-to-face and then saw what Denver was going to offer for him, that the last man on the earth, Pete Carroll, get convinced to trade Russell Wilson. Not so now. Now that John Schneider makes the trades he makes and the deals he makes and the free agent signings he makes with Mike Macdonald's input, but it's John Schneider's job has changed quite a bit, and his impetus to go out and get things and do things. He doesn't need Pete Carroll's approval to do that anymore, and Mike Macdonald is now under him rather than vice versa. That's a different situation for the head coach than it was under Carroll.
Yeah, hey Greg, you brought up DK Metcalf and Geno Smith at the beginning of the offseason. Obviously, a couple of polarizing guys that were on this with this franchise, and they were carryover guys from the Pete era. Especially, you talk about the shirt off thing and that relationship, especially with DK. Seems like he really built, and Geno Smith. I mean, really, Pete was the guy that gave him another shot to
Oh yeah.
revitalize his career. I mean, when you look at it now, when the dust is settled, and you say if you look at Mike Macdonald, um, do you think he's in a better place with those two guys kind of out the door now that he kind of gets to move on almost with kind of this real start of his era? Most of any of the big name guys, even Tyler Lockett, I know he was on the other side of his career, but he's also gone. Do you think that maybe even helps Mike even more now looking to just kind of push forward with this new era as the head coach?
Well, we'll see. If Sam Darnold doesn't work out, then no, they're not better at the most important position. I think in terms of just straight passing the football that they got worse at quarterback. And now there's a hell of a lot more that's going to go into that. And Sam Darnold is only going to be as good as his running game is, which means he's only going to be as good as his offensive line run blocks. Is Mike Macdonald? It's not like Mike Macdonald got his own guy in at quarterback. Sam Darnold wasn't any more of a Mike Macdonald guy than anybody else because Darnold and Macdonald had never been together before. It's not like they brought in a Baltimore Raven or somebody that John Harbaugh and Macdonald groomed together. But having said that, Geno Smith absolutely did not have the relationship with Macdonald that he did with Carroll. Look, Carroll saved his career. Yeah. Carroll's the first guy who gave him more than a one-year contract since the Jets released him following his rookie deal. People forget Geno Smith was on 7 consecutive veteran minimum one-year salaries until Pete Carroll gave him the starting job. And he was on a one-year deal when he gave him the starting job. When they traded Russell Wilson, he goes out, gets to his first Pro Bowl, his first playoff start, and he breaks 14 records, and he gets a $75 million contract extension. Geno Smith might be out of the league if it wasn't for Pete Carroll and that decision he made. So Pete Carroll got Geno Smith $75 million on a Seahawks contract, and then he got him $100+ million or whatever it ended up being with the Raiders. Pete Carroll did that. So no way Geno Smith had the relationship, tightness, and affinity with Mike Macdonald than he did with Pete Carroll. So Macdonald now can start from, to your point, Ryan, he can start from scratch with his quarterback, where he was playing from behind as far as tightness with his head coach and the quarterback's relationship. Well, now he can start ground zero with not only with his starting quarterback, Sam Darnold, but with his quarterback he just drafted. I mean, this is only the third quarterback. I don't have to remind you guys, it's the third quarterback in 16 years the Seahawks have drafted. So the head coach, Jalen Milroe, his head coach's relationship with Jalen Milroe from day one is unlike any but other than 2 quarterbacks in the last pretty much this whole century. So he's got 4 years to grow and develop and bond with Jalen Milroe, whatever that becomes of in that project. So in that regard, he's better off for the future at the sport's most important position. And then I already said he's better off than he was on defense at this time last year. One, he has a middle linebacker who plays the way he wants to. And actually, when he tackles guys, the guys go to the ground. He didn't have that this time last year. And he has guys on defense that know his system better than did last year.
Greg, the last thing I wanted to touch on with Mike Macdonald and obviously this new era is they had almost full complete attendance for minicamp, which is something that Pete never had. And I don't remember even Mike Holmgren really having at points when that was around. Like, I don't know, from your perspective, you've been covering the league for years. You were down with the Raiders. Have you ever seen a team where they had that much buy-in for essentially voluntary or mandatory voluntary kind of minicamp before training camp?
No, I wrote that in the News Tribune. I said that on KJR. I've never been at an off-season set of workouts, voluntary workouts with 100% participation. And that's what Macdonald had. It wasn't every day that 100% were out there, but at some point during the voluntary portions of OTAs and off-season training, all 100%, 90 players were there. Injured guys, 32-year-old dads who live in Texas, in the case of Jonathan Hankins and Jaron Reed. I mean, people who didn't have to be here. Leonard Williams makes $65 million and has a starting job for the next 4 years here. He didn't have to be here. He was here. Cooper Kupp is a Super Bowl MVP and an Offensive Player of the Year a couple years ago. He's got a contract that says he doesn't need to be. He was here. So it was noticeable. I wrote about it. I asked guys about it. And Jaron Reed told me that the players understood that to get the younger players to buy in, especially the new offense to buy into this coaching staff, the coaching staff needed support, and they needed the veteran players to be here and the younger players to see that. Hey, if Jaron Reed and Jonathan Hankins and Cooper Kupp are here, and what's that mean for this team? And he thinks the team got tighter in these offseason months than it was last year. He also, Leonard Williams brought up something that was really interesting. He said that the defensive coaches in the offseason for the first time had the players get up in front of team meetings and talk about their why. And they brought pictures of their family, their parents, their wives, their spouses, their kids. They told him, they got up and said, this is why I play. This is why I play hurt. This is why we make the sacrifice for these people. And Leonard Williams said it really brought the team together. And that it's good to know each other on that basis. And the defensive coaches asked to do that. So a lot of bonding going on, and they could do that because 90 out of 90 players were there. I mean, you guys remember Marshawn Lynch almost was never here. Bruce Irvin used to not come. Michael Bennett stayed in Hawaii with his wife and girls. And Pete Carroll basically said, yeah, so what? It's voluntary. I don't care. And Mike Macdonald did absolutely appreciate the attendance this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, certain things just can't be measured by numbers at all, right? And that's the thing. Some people don't put a lot of weight into it, but it's great to see, Greg. I mean, like to your point, just the new guys coming up and just seeing what the culture is all about here. It was awesome to see.
Yeah, it can only help them. Absolutely.
100%. And talking about the defense, moving over to the defense a little bit, I want to ask you how dynamic you think this defense can be. Obviously with guys like Nick Emenwari getting drafted, seems like another chess piece for Mike, Devin Witherspoon. I also want to touch on the guy that recently just got brought in. He almost seems like a Pete Carroll thing. You bring a guy back in the building with Shaq Griffin. So, touch on the Shaq signing, how you think that's going to fit in, as well as just how versatile can this defense really become now with the pieces that you kind of got here.
Well, personnel-wise, and knowledge-wise, they're getting to the point that Macdonald wants to use his full array of systems and changes and tricks and smoke and mirrors. He didn't get to do that last year. He started to at the end of the year, but I think you're going to see Devin Witherspoon in many more varied roles. I think you're going to see Witherspoon blitzing a lot more. I think you're going to see Nick Emenwari, who's just a fascinating study to me. He is a very intriguing player. He looks way bigger than 220 pounds. I hesitate to say this, but he looks way bigger than Cam Chancellor looked in his uniform. And Emenwari hasn't even had shoulder pads on yet. Emenwari was playing outside linebacker in drills. He was his third safety in a lot of the scrimmaging. They talked about using him as a nickel to start, but I'm not sure they're going to do that. Excuse me. I had a cold all week. Emenwari is the new number 3 that's going to play a lot. And they're going to use him a lot. Just as the night they drafted him, they said they would. They're going to use him as Kyle Hamilton and Cam Chancellor near the line of scrimmage. It wouldn't surprise me to see Emenwari and Ernest Jones often on the field as the only linebackers, while they want to go extra defensive backs with Witherspoon and a combination of either Josh Jobe and Shaquille Griffin. Shaquille Griffin's fit. One, he's still only 29 years old. He's not yet 30, which is hard to believe. It seems like he's been in the league for a long time. He knows the Seattle culture, even though he doesn't know Mike Macdonald's system. And he was relatively cheap for $3 million, non-guaranteed. That's why he's here. And he, to me, is going to compete with Josh Jobe as the third corner. In off-season OTAs, minicamps, I saw Jobe outside and Witherspoon inside quite a bit as the nickel. I think Witherspoon's going to play a lot of nickel, and I don't think Emenwari is penciled into the nickel spot. I think they're going to use him in a variety of ways. The man that I really am interested to see how they use and use more, because I think they have to, is Byron Murphy. He cannot play 49% of the snaps again this year. He has to play outside more. I think he has to play as a 3 technique. I think he may even play some outside defensive end as a pass rusher, and I think they can move him around with nose tackle. But they will have failed if he played fewer than 50% of the snaps again this year.
With that defense, Greg, and obviously, Mike Macdonald's getting to bring back essentially the entire defense that he had last year, minus a few players that have left, and obviously, and Rayshon Jenkins being one, the linebackers we mentioned that are now gone that he started with last year. The one group I still have questions about is this edge group, and not so much the ability to stop the run, but more to affect the passer. And they brought in DeMarcus Lawrence this year, but he's not really coming in to be a pass rush specialist, more of a edge setting kind of run edge defender. Do you think Boye Mafe and Derek Hall are going to be able to take some sort of extra jump, or not even a jump, but be more consistent this year in their pass rush than they have in the past few?
Yeah, they have to. I know that Mike Macdonald really likes Derek Hall, and I think he's going to unleash him and maybe flip him side to side, change him around, and match him up on what they think are certain good matchup on a tackle. You might see a lot more multiplicity from him than for Derek Hall than you saw last year. The key to me, you mentioned Lawrence. What I saw during OTAs and minicamps was Lawrence, Mafe, and Derek Hall working together as the stand-up outside pass rusher, more to the edge rusher outside linebacker than as a defensive end that you mentioned, Bryce. I know he didn't do that in Dallas. He was more of a hand-on-the-ground end. And so it looks like the Seahawks are going to try him in a different role. Now, that's something of an experiment because he spent 11 years doing defensive line work primarily. Aiden Dirty knows him better than anybody on the staff. Of course, Dirty coached him a few years in Dallas as a defensive line coach. Yet Dirty was working with stand-up pass rush moves with Boye Mafe and Hall and Lawrence. So it's going to be interesting to see as training camp goes if that continues. The guy to me at that position, who I think is more important than any of them we just mentioned, Chenin Wosu. If he can set the edge against the run the way he was doing before he got these round of injuries the last two seasons, the way he was when they got him the $50 million contract, everyone talks about the 9.5 sacks that Nwosu had. It was his run stopping that made him so valuable to that defense a few years ago. Carroll loved his run. That's the reason they signed him from the Chargers, was because he's an every down off edge linebacker, not because he can rush the passer. He can rush the passer, but this team doesn't need him to do that. This team needs to stop the run. Nwosu has to be healthy. He was a big loss for them last year. And the two different injuries and spending most of the season on injured reserve, he may not be ready for the start of training camp. He wasn't on the field for OTAs or the mini camp. But Chenin Wosu, he took a pay cut this year. He's got a prove-it season here. Where is his career going? It's something at a crossroads. He got the big deal and hasn't been on the field since he signed it. If he stays off the field and not producing, I could see this being his last Seahawks season. Yet this defense absolutely needs his run stopping. He, to me, is a really key guy that they need to see a rise from this season.
Yeah, I mean, Chen is almost sometimes forgotten just because of all the injuries, but like you said, so vital, right? If we can just keep him on the field, and like you said, yeah, he's got to kind of have a prove it, stay healthy year. Yeah, I mean, really will add to it. Greg, just sort of moving over to the offense a little bit. We all know the Ryan Grubb, fiasco, and just the one and done. But being down there and now seeing Clint Kubiak's new offense and scheme and all that, how much different does it look from a scheme standpoint, and also just the overall feel of the offense coming into it so far?
Well, you know what the difference is between night and day or black and white? That's pretty much the difference between last year's offense and so far what I've seen this year. It is polar opposites. Guys, the first 4 plays they ran in OTAs, and then again, the first 4 plays they ran in a minicamp of ones-on-ones was I formation, toss sweep, student body right. I'm talking Charles White, 1978 USC Trojans with John Robinson. That's what it looked like. I haven't seen I formation used in Seattle since when? Max Strong? They're going to go a lot of 2-back. And they're going to go a lot of 22 and 12 with 2 tight ends. They're going to go heavy, and they're going to go often. And last year with the Saints, Kubiak went 2 backs with a fullback 25% of the time. I don't know if the Seahawks have gone two backs in 25 times in 25 years. So there's a fundamental change in the approach. And why is that? Because they want to run the ball, and they want the whole team to know they're running the ball. They want the defense to know they're running the ball. Most of all, they want the offensive line to know they're running the ball. Will this work? I don't know. I haven't seen him in pads yet. I haven't seen Gray Zabel in pads yet. I can tell you this, Gray Zabel was the fastest guy off the ball at the offseason practices. When I stepped back and looked from the end zone at 5 guys across the formation, whose head did I see first running laterally off the ball? It was Gray Zabel every single time. And that's why he's here, because he runs laterally and outside zone. A couple predictions on offense with this offensive line. I think that the starting center and the starting left guard are going to be both North Dakota State guys. Second-year guy Jalen Sindell and the first-year rookie, first-round draft pick Gray Zabel are going to start side by side. I think Abe Lucas knows that he has to win this year to get a new contract. I think you're going to see him stay on the field, whether his knee's hurting or not. And he's going to probably play 17 games, and how much his knee holds up will be how effective he is. If they have a healthy Abe Lucas, they are so much better on the offensive line, obviously. Charles Cross, well, you say, well, he just re-signed it here. He's got a 50-year option guaranteeing him for next year. He's playing for the multi-year deal that the Seahawks really want to get him before the season starts, so they don't have to pay him the $17 million against the cap as the whole hit next year. So there's something of a prove-it season for him too. It seemed like, well, the Seahawks picked up the 50-year rookie option. It doesn't sound like they're going to, well, they picked it up to buy more time to sign him to a multi-year deal at a better cap rate. So he's playing something of a prove-it season too. Right guard to me, guys, is just wide open. 3 guys right now I see are going to be alternating with the opportunity at the beginning of training camp. I was surprised to see how much Christian Haynes was the number one in the sense that he was the first guy to take the reps with the ones during OTAs and minicamp, but he split the reps almost evenly with Anthony Bradford. Satalomea was the best of the bunch last year. In the final 6 games of the season he started, he was exclusively on the second team during OTA and minicamp. Macdonald said afterwards, no, Lamea's still right in it too, and there's at least 3 guys there that are going to be competing for that spot. But the 2 guard position, let's say 1 guard position, because Zabel's got the left guard position, but the right guard position and center is the key to this line, obviously, and it still remains to be seen where that is in the training camp, and they still have to figure that out. Bottom line is, guys, if they don't run block, the season's a failure. Sam Darnold will be a failure. Cooper Kupp won't catch the passes he should catch. Jackson Smith and Jigba won't get anywhere near 100 catches, and it'll fail. But this is a team that is getting built and to play the way of a lot of 17-13 wins, and Macdonald will take that.
So with this offense, Greg, and what you've seen from it, and you were talking about how it's night and day in the way it just totally operates and the power sweep that they're running, like it's Vince Lombardi era kind of football out there. Watching the coaches and, John Benton and Rick Dennison and Andrew Janoku and just even Clint Kubiak, is there a different way that they're able to communicate in the practices or even run than what you saw last year with Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff and their regime style of offense?
Well, I haven't seen it so far because really, again, they haven't had pads and true line drills yet. But I get a sense in talking to some of the players that they believe in this system more. I got the feeling that last year, no one ever told me this in so many words, but in some of the things they said and did, I think some of especially the veteran players thought, we got 2 college coaches here who don't really know what they're doing. Now they have 2 coaches, as I mentioned, who have 47 years combined experience coaching the offensive line. Rick Dennison won Super Bowl rings with Mike Shanahan's Denver Broncos, Terrell Davis in the 1990s. That's how long he's been coaching outside zone. So when Abe Lucas wonders whether outside zone is the thing that should work, all he has to do is turn on clips of Terrell Davis and John Elway from the 1990s and say, oh, Vince Lombardi trophies, I guess this works. So there's a cachet behind this system. Last year was just a mismatch of styles, like I said. They didn't know on one play if they were going to be doing inside zone, whether they're going to pull or trap, whether they were going to go outside zone. Are they doing man blocking? Are they double teaming? Are we going to the second level? Are we just – they were jacks of all trades and masters of none. This year, they're trying to be jacks of fewer trades and masters of one. And Abe Lucas mentioned that specifically, that we're trying to be elite at fewer things. And they think that the clarity and the simplicity on the offensive line is going to help the entire offense. Obviously, if they can block better, it will. But guys, it wouldn't surprise me if this team runs 25 plus times a game, even if they're only gaining 2 or 3 yards a pop. This is one of these teams that could be fans booing because it's 2nd and 7 and 8 and they're running the ball again. That's the identity they're going to try to establish.
I mean, I love it, Greg. I just think, I feel like, yeah, the confidence level of like, this is what we want to do is refreshing. You know, let's get great at one thing and just go do it great. I just think it's refreshing. I think I think if this defense becomes that top 5 defense we're hoping for, then the offense just kind of, just sort of, take care of the football and, don't do anything stupid, I guess, right? Like, and I think that's just, you just saw so much of that last year with Ryan Grubb, and it was more frustrating to see it. I would take it the other way completely, like just get up there and run. And so I think it's going to be refreshing to kind of see things a lot different, like you said, night and day, right? I think it's going to be obviously must see, and we'll see. But keeping on the offense in the quarterback room, Greg, looking at it, I know it's early on and they're not in pads yet. You have a completely different room, right? And some can say you got the guy there now to still compete, and you finally potentially got that guy for the future. How are you seeing that quarterback room right now? And what's your confidence level going in with Sam? I know you mentioned that, it's going to be based on, how they run the football and run block, but how do you feel about that quarterback room as a whole?
They're so much better, Ryan, than they were 12 months ago at the overall position and going forward. They were a year-to-year proposition with Geno Smith. This time last year, they knew Smith was going into a year that they were going to decide after it whether they wanted to extend him or move on from him. And even if they had extended him this past offseason, he would probably only be on a 1 or 2 more year deal anyway. They would not have drafted Jalen Milroe had they extended Geno Smith, and therefore you wouldn't have your quarterback of the future. It found it interesting that they signed Drew Lock to a 2-year deal instead of a 1-year deal. That was a departure from what Schneider has done for go back to Brett Hundley and all the veteran that they've had as backups. The 2-year deal tells me that they say, okay, if this doesn't work out, we're ready to pull the plug quickly on Sam Darnold and bring Drew Lock in because we think he can. We've seen him win games and beat the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday Night Football for this offense. He can do it. I hesitate to say this, but if you want to rank how the quarterbacks looked in OTAs and minicamps, Drew Lock was the best-looking thrower. Sam Darnold's learning a lot, and you can say, well, he was with Shanahan's system and Kubiak in San Francisco a couple years ago, but that was Shanahan's system. Yeah, and it was outside zone, but all the terminology and all the play calling, everything else was Shanahan's, not Kubiak's. This is new to Darnold. So he's doing a little swimming mentally on the field right now, and he will be in the start of training camp. He was missing passes that an NFL veteran quarterback should not miss. I don't expect that to be the case during training camp. He's the clear number 1. I'm not trying to portray that he's not, but the Seahawks and Drew Lock have a guy that they know can win games if they need him to. They did not have that last year. Sam Howell obviously could not win games if they needed him to when they had to bring him in late in the season when Smith got banged up, especially against the Packers. Sam Howell last year couldn't hit Lake Washington from the practice field, and they got alarmed from the start about what that looked like. And it really didn't get much better as the season went on. But the Milroe pick, guys, this makes this team more interesting to me. Personally, what I have to do day to day, they're more interesting with Jalen Milroe. It's fascinating already to see his progress as a thrower from the start of rookie minicamp to the end of veteran minicamp. It was like 2 different guys. At the start of the rookie minicamp, he looked like Sam Howell. At the end of the veteran minicamp, he looked like Geno Smith as a pure thrower of the ball. And I was like, wait a minute, I thought he couldn't throw the football. He had balance. He had accuracy at 40-plus yards down the field. He did it on a line. He did it on a rainbow with touch. He looked exquisite. Oh, by the way, he can run over 220-pound linebackers like he did in college. Well, let's see some of that. Here's what you're going to see from Jalen Milroe. You are going to see a package of plays, probably 6 or more, that Kubiak puts him in games, especially early in the season. I'd be shocked if he didn't play 6 or so plays against the 49ers in week 1 so that the Steelers in week 2 and everybody else in the rest of the schedule has to game plan for that. That's going to eat up 3 or 4 hours of prep time and practice time at least a week for defenses that the Seahawks have never had to have before. I've been trying to think about a quarterback the Seahawks have had that had this dimension in a game, and I can't think of one. I think of Terrell Pryor maybe, but they never gave Pryor a package of plays. Seneca Wallace, well, Wallace often played wide receiver, and even when they did bring Wallace in, sometimes they even kept Matt Hasselbeck in out at wide receiver. Homer did. I don't know of a quarterback. I don't think they've had one that they've had a specific package of plays to replace the starter with to change how the defense defends them. You're going to see Kubiak use Milroe for outside bootleg plays, run pass options, quarterback draws, maybe even the tush push, quarterback running as a weapon, and that's a dimension Seattle hasn't had. I think it's fascinating if he improves as a passer, and his, like I said, the early returns of how he improved just this offseason suggest he is a rapid improver. The Seahawks could have their starting quarterback from 2027 and beyond already. And when have we ever said that before? That they already have their quarterback of the future. They haven't had one since they drafted Russell Wilson.
I was going to say this year, Greg, when they made the pick of Milroe, my first thought was, I wonder what Gregg Bell is thinking right now after all the times you asked John Schneider, when are you going to draft a quarterback? I was like, that's going to be a very interesting press conference for Greg to finally say, hey, you did it. Congratulations.
I was told at the Combine by a couple people with the team and on the team that they were going to try to draft Milroe. The question was whether they were going to draft up in the 3rd round or up in the 2nd round to do it. And then the way the draft board was coming around, they said, we don't have to draft up to get him. We'll wait. And we have multiple picks in round 3. We'll take him in round 3. So I had an inkling. I mocked it at the News Tribune and wrote about it, that I thought they were going to take Milroe. They love his character. They love the fact that he comes from a military family, that his father was a career Navy guy. His mother was Marine, and his mother was a career Navy medical. They love that he went through 3 or 4 coordinators in Alabama in 3 seasons, yet now you can say he didn't excel throwing the football accuracy-wise, but the guy ran for 32 touchdowns in 2 seasons in the SEC. He's played in the biggest games at the highest levels, which Snyder and his scouting staff really love. Yeah, I was personally happy that they finally drafted a quarterback, 1, so I don't have to keep asking that question anymore, but 2, they just are more interesting and they're more dynamic. And Jalen Milroe is going to be a national fascination. You'll see he'll be a national story after week 1 because of the 6 plays that he played against the 49ers.
Well, and that's the thing that I really liked, as the draft process went along, even leading up to that night of the draft, I had a feeling, when they brought Milroe in, that there was something about him that they really liked. Mm-hmm. But the thing for me that I like about this whole quarterback room now, Greg, is there's no pressure on Milroe. If Sam Darnold gets hurt, he's immediately the next guy. You can let him truly, like you said, develop and improve as a passer, still use him in certain packages, but not stress this kid out that, hey, you know what? If Sam Darnold goes down for 3 games, you're now the guy that's going to try and get this team with all these other pieces towards the playoffs and into the playoffs. You have Drew Lock, who we know can do that to an extent for a period of time. You now can allow this kid to truly develop. And like you said, 2027 and further, Seattle may have found their next franchise quarterback potentially, which, again, would be a huge thing to find him in the 3rd round and find another guy that could potentially be a X factor in the NFL. Yeah,
he ain't Trevon Boykin, I can tell you that. And Boykin had to play that year when Wilson finally went down, and that really has spooked them ever since, that, one, we're going to have a veteran that's available. Schneider, he evolved in his answer about what's your quarterback of the future. You remember last year when he said, is that a serious question? Yeah, it was. So I asked him the same question in the Combine, and he smiled because he knew I was going to ask it again. And he gave me a more honest answer then. He said, all these years, the draft board hasn't fallen to us. I hope the draft board talks to us. And it's exactly what happened this year. Instead of the quarterbacks going overinflated high, and a guy like in previous years, maybe a guy like Milroe gets drafted in the 2nd round when the Seahawks weren't willing to take him, the draft board came exactly to them. And they could still trade up and get Eamon Worry. They could still draft Arroyo in the 2nd round, the tight end from Miami. and then you'll get your quarterback in the third round. And to your point, a third-round draft pick doesn't have to nor should play in the first, unless Russell Wilson is the meteor out of the sky, the once-in-a-generation guy draft pick that he was. So he does have that. And anytime Kubiak can scare the bejesus out of some defensive coordinators by running Milrow and a couple of run plays around the end at 200-plus pounds.
Yeah, it felt like the perfect quarterback draft for Schneider, right? Just with all these later value guys, right? It just felt like it just fell into place instead of being like, it just John going out and trying to move up in a top 10 situation like the year prior with 6 QBs out of the first 12 picks. Like,
right.
It just felt like more of a, Russell Wilson-esque, right? Get this guy with the value there. And we saw what Russ did, came out of the gate, but it's just a great situation. So yeah, I agree with you, Greg. This is just a great spot to be in. Just, getting into looking ahead here and looking ahead to training camp and training camp battles. We touched on both offense and defense, touched on the line. What training camp battles are you most looking forward to coming into this?
Well, even if it wasn't the case this year, I always pay most attention to the offensive and defensive line scrimmaging, one-on-one pass rush drills, the physicality. You only get that in training camp. They don't even do it during the regular season. Of course, they don't do it in the offseason. So training camp is the only time on the calendar year that you see offensive and defensive linemen truly going at it. And that's when and it's in the early days of August too, late days of July, early days in August when the pads come on for the first time. That's when coaches' decisions get made because that's the only time they really let guys go at each other. That's why you've had the fights you've had, the injuries you've had. And it's the most physical. It used to be like practices were like that in Oklahoma drills and 2-a-days and all that all the time. But in today's NFL, that's the only time it's true football in training camp. So I'll be standing front and center for all of that to see what Christian Haynes versus Anthony Bradford looks at. Bradford, Macdonald has said, Bradford knows it's go time for him. He's now in his third year since they drafted him in the 4th round from LSU. He's more of a DJ Fluker road grader type than he is an athletic run off the ball guy that this current system demands. So Bradford has to change his body and his style to fit this offense. Macdonald said he's already changed his body. And he said that his body composition got a lot better this offseason. So will that mean quicker play off the ball? And will that be better lateral movement? If it does, then he's going to compete with Christian Haynes for that spot. I wouldn't count out Mamea either. I already mentioned Jalen Sindell. He's going to go against Olo with Timmy at the center position. Guys, I haven't heard very many coaches and scouts and personnel guys go on and on about a second-year undrafted rookie free agent as they did Jalen Sindell this offseason. I was kind of like, wait a minute, you didn't even draft this guy. Why are you talking? He didn't even play last year. Why are you talking so much about him? They said that this system fits Sindell so much better than last year's system, and that, to me, he has a real chance to be the starting center. The other training camp battles, it's not a battle, but I want to see how they use Byron Murphy. Again, I want to see if he's a 3-tech, how much they're going to use at nose tackle. They brought Hankins back. They still have Jaron Reed. Where are they going to put Murphy and how often are they going to use him? I think Macdonald knows he's going to use way, way more of 91 this year than he did last year. Does Tyrese Knight stay the outside linebacker, the weak side linebacker? They like him. That's a question that I think Nick Eamon-Worry might have a hand in answering. I mentioned earlier, I think they're going to have a lot of times on the field of just Eamon-Worry and Ernest Jones as the only linebackers. And then they go to their strength in the secondary with all the numbers and guys they have back there and run heavy on defensive backs. I could see dime. I could see 3 pass rushers and 2 defensive backs, or 2 linebackers, 6 defensive backs, and 3 down linemen. I could see that or 3 pass rushers. I could see that as a Mike Macdonald set. Eamon-Worry, guys, he could end up being the most impactful guy in this team. New splash guy. I still think Devin Witherspoon is the best player in the team. I think he's going to get used that way. But I think Eamon-Worry has a chance to be a big, immediate splash guy down in the box against the run, matching up against tight ends and over the middle guys in pass coverage and getting pressure on the quarterback. They sent him off the edge quite a bit in OTAs and minicamps, and the offense wasn't even picking him up. It was like they didn't even think he was coming. He was rushing free all the time. I mentioned how fascinating Jalen Milroe is. Nick Eamon-Worry is the defensive equivalent of how fascinating a player he is. I'm really excited to see how they use him. And it'll be really intriguing on how much Macdonald utilizes Eamon-Worry and at whose expense is that.
So one of the training camp battles I'm kind of interested in, Greg, and I wanted to get your thoughts on is kind of the tight end and receiver because of Arroyo being there. And they've made kind of reference to him potentially being a guy they can use out at that X receiver spot.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Noah Fant's coming back. AJ Barner had a pretty good rookie season, which I don't think a lot of people were expecting for him coming out of Michigan and basically being kind of set up as a blocker and showed that he can be quite a receiving threat to an extent. How do you see the tight end and the receiver numbers working out now? Because you made the mention that they're going to be more of a 12, 22 personnel team. Seattle's had a history of carrying 6 receivers or sometimes 7. How does that affect, a Jake Bobo and Torrey Horton and Ricky White that they've just drafted? How do you think that might all shape out this year in the training camp battles?
Well, Torrey Horton and Ricky White are going to have to play special teams to make this team. Bobo is valuable because of his blocking. And what's really, I think of a guy like Cody White, who is so productive every time he gets a chance. Every time he's with the ones in practice, the few times he was on the field last year, Cody White produced. That guy deserves to play. It might have to come at Jake Bobo's expense, the way the roster's shaken out because of all the tight ends you just mentioned. The few times Arroyo was on the ones in the OTAs and minicamps, it was as an X outside. When he was an inline tight end, he was a backup. They have Eric Saubert, the former veteran of the 49ers and the Bears, also in as more of a blocker. And I think he makes the team for special teams and blocking too. They now have Brady Russell in the backfield at fullback instead of tight end. If Brady Russell, as good as he and as valuable he's been on special teams, if Brady Russell can't beat out Robbie Oots, the new 270-pound converted tight end rookie from Alabama at fullback, I'm not sure there's a place for him because Saubert basically is what Brady Russell would have been as a blocking tight end, unless they keep both Saubert and Brady Russell for special teams. So Arroyo, to me, again, I'm bringing up things that Seahawks fans probably don't want me to say. Arroyo, to me, reminds me a little bit like Jimmy Graham in that he's a tall, lanky, wide receiver type in the tight end's position. I didn't see anything yet because the pads haven't been on to see what kind of a blocker he is. But if he can't inline block, then he would become a Jimmy Graham in terms of how Kubiak's offense wants to work. AJ Barner, Eric Saubert could end up being your inline tight end blocking guys. Honestly, guys, I'm surprised Noah Fant's still on the team. I thought they were going to release him this offseason with the salary cap number being north of $10 million, going into the final year of his deal. I know Macdonald talks him up a lot, but he just doesn't have the production for a $20+ million tight end and the number one guy, I don't think. And so if that's the next guy they cut in a salary cap move to free up a roster logjam in training camp, it wouldn't shock me.
Greg, I've got one more question, kind of a little offbeat for you. It has to do with the 2 coordinators. And, obviously the NFL is all about changing head coaches and going for the next young, innovative thing. If Clint Kubiak has a really good season this year, or, Dirty does as well, do you think there's a chance either one of them could potentially be in the next head coaching circuit and have options just due to their, ability with this elite defense for Dirty to kind of show what he can do, or even for Clint Kubiak, who's been around a while, has the name, comes from that Shanahan offense philosophy, which everyone kind of wants to dive into. Do you think there's a possibility that Seattle could potentially, if things go well for them, be up to looking for new coaches again?
I could see it with Kubiak more than with Dirty. Dirty does not have, or at least hasn't had, any game day responsibilities other than coaching a position. On the bench, he's with the defensive lineman. He looks like a defensive line coach during games to me. I know he has the headset, but Macdonald has all the play calling responsibilities. Now, I know they share game planning responsibilities, Macdonald and Dirty, but I think the rest of the league would need to see more responsibility-wise. It's Mike Macdonald's defense. And so I don't see a direct path yet for Dirty to do that. But Kubiak, on the other hand, you're right. He's been around and done this in a few stops now, Minnesota, was the offensive coordinator and play caller a few years ago, the Saints last year, and his Denver ties, and as well as the San Francisco 49ers a couple years ago, Shanahan. I'll tell you what, if Kubiak can transform the offense and get them to a top 10 offense and this team to win a division, he deserves a head coaching job, because the last 3 offensive coordinators have failed to do any of that. Now, they haven't changed a ton of personnel on the offensive line, but they've changed some, including Gray Zabel, but they've changed the approach. And Kubiak's success is going to be tied to Rick Dennison and John Benton. And those could end up being the 2 most pivotal hires to this Seahawks season and next season going forward. If Dennison and Benton can do what they've done in other places and fix this offensive line, Kubiak deserves a head coaching job for bringing those guys in and deserves a raise. Guys, we've been talking about it, seeing it for 10 years. This offensive line has just been a joke at times as far as NFL quality. If Kubiak can fix that alone, I'd say give him a head coaching job for that alone, for the guys he hires. Then the Seahawks task would be to replicate the same system and try to keep Dennison and Benton around to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For me personally, Greg, it's going to be an intriguing camp and season, just especially what you just mentioned, this offensive line and how can they finally put it together and get this offensive rolling, especially how they want to run the football. So yeah, it's going to be awesome. Greg, this has been awesome conversation again, as always, having you on. We really appreciate it. But before we let you go and get you out of here, why don't you let everybody know what you got coming up and where they can find all your stuff?
Well, thanks, Ryan. I'll do a set of stories heading into training camp of the battles to watch, much like we've talked about, and what to expect and what's different about the team heading into training camp than it was last year, and Mike Macdonald's influence and the entirely new offenses I've already mentioned. That'll be at the newstribune.com here in the coming weeks. I'll go hide for a few weeks before I put those out at the end of July sometime. But my work, you find it at Twitter X or whatever the kids call it now, at Gbell Seattle, and thenewstribune.com is where you find it online. Thanks a lot.
Awesome stuff, Greg. Again, we love having you on, guys. Go check it out. We'll throw the links in the description. And Greg, once again, appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon in the future here.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks, Bryce. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg. Guys, that was Gregg Bell once again on the show. Greg's becoming kind of a regular guy to have on the show for us. So, a beat reporter for the Hawks. He's Tacoma News Tribune. I mean, he has covered the NFL for a long, long time. So to have a guy like Greg on and his insight, man, it's awesome stuff.
Yeah, no, it's really great. And the one thing with Greg that I love is he tells you like it is. He tells you exactly what he's seeing. There's no sugarcoating it. There's no nothing. And that's why I love having Greg. And he's one of my immediate follows. Him, Corbin Smith are 2 of my go-to guys for Seahawk coverage, along with Brady Henderson. The 3 of them are kind of like the trifecta, the perfect, correspondence for the Seahawks and what they bring. And with Greg, the one thing I did think that was kind of interesting was just how he talked about how different things are in year 2 for Mike Macdonald, and how much more, Mike Macdonald is pushing his style into the Seahawks building and into the bloodlines of this franchise. And it's also interesting what he said about John Schneider and how much his job has now changed, because he's the one making the decisions. There is no hierarchy of John having to report to someone above him to go, hey, I want to go after this player. It's, hey, if John wants this player, it's, hey, Mike, what do you think of this guy? Mike goes, yeah, I like him. I'll find a way to make it work. John goes and makes it happen.
Yeah, and it really seems like John also has the confidence. I mean, I know he hired Mike, but to really, take what Mike's saying into account, and Rick Dennison and guys that Greg mentioned, hey, look what John did this year in the draft. He went out and he got a guard, right? And that's just never happens in round 1. So to kind of have this back and forth, it seems like a relationship that really could become something special. And it's great. And when Greg mentioned, and when we talked about the quarterback room too, early on in the show, he's like, you kind of downgrade in the throwing aspect, but when you talk about the quarterback room, he's like, man, it's just so much better than it was 12 months ago, because you have Sam that, so this run game gets going. he'll be successful. And you also have the future. I mean, speaking with Greg, man, he really seems like he's high on Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, no, what he said about how his improvement, how he looked like Sam Howell at rookie minicamp, and then all of a sudden he looked like he was throwing the ball as well as a Geno Smith in that short time period. And I think that leads to what we heard, Clint Kubiak and Mike Macdonald say about Milroe being at the facility at 4:30 in the morning, going through these plays, doing these things. He works with Jordan Palmer, who's one of the best quarterback trainers out there, who Sam Darnold even works with. And Josh Allen, and you can see those things already starting to happen. The best thing is this kid, again, he doesn't have to come in and be this franchise's savior. There's no pressure on him to be anything more than a development quarterback right now and lend his athleticism to the offense to make it more of a dynamic offense. The other thing about the quarterback room that I think was really interesting was what Greg said about Sam Darnold kind of swimming right now in this offense and trying to learn it all. We all assume because he had spent a little time with Kubiak in San Francisco and with Kevin O'Connell last year at the Vikings, the transition might have been a bit smoother because the system's similar. But like he even said, Clint Kubiak's terminology and certain things are going to still be different than those guys. So it's still a learning experience for Sam Darnold. But like he said, he doesn't expect Sam to be in that same situation come training camp, which that excites me again. I'm not looking for Sam Darnold to be Geno Smith. That's not what I'm looking for Sam Darnold to come in and be. I'm looking for Sam Darnold to come in and be a quarterback that can help push this team a little bit farther ahead of where it has been in offense, and also not also have the entire offense be burdened on the right arm of a quarterback to move the ball. We need, and like Greg said, this team is going to be a running football team, and they don't care if we don't like it as fans in certain situations. They're going to run the football.
Yeah, and you talk about the right arm of a quarterback, like that's all we saw last year, and it just didn't turn out well at all. I don't care who the offensive coordinator was. It's just not a good recipe. So to have it, like he said, night and day, it just excites you, man. And I'm in the camp of I welcome them run the football, especially the backs that we have. And to Greg's point, it just comes down to how is this line gonna come into play. So awesome. It's gonna be like you and I are in the same camp. Can't wait to get camp going, get on the field, and just playing football at this point. So it's gonna be awesome, guys. Again, Gregg Bell, his stuff, go check it out. Gonna be in the description there. Guy has he's been covering the NFL forever. So just just a guy we love to have on the show. So go check out his work. And that's pretty much it for us tonight, guys. We're gonna keep plugging along. We got Pulse of the Hawks coming back. A little bit of a hiatus there with Mookie Alexander, but we're gonna get back rolling again. So make sure you check that out. That's gonna be Monday nights again, bi-weekly. So check that out coming up. Also, we are a part of the Field Goals team, so go over there as well and check out all that stuff. There's a lot of great work over there. Bryce, before we get out of here, any final thoughts?
Guys, become a YouTube member of our channel. It'll give you perks and stuff. Head over to our HawksZoneRundown.com website for our merch. We've got hats, hoodies, beanies, shirts, everything. We'll be coming out with a couple more designs coming into training camp here. And yeah, guys, we're going to keep bringing you content along the way here, and can't wait for this training camp to finally kick off.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, check out all that. Appreciate everybody that's supporting the channel. Go down, subscribe. That's it for us tonight. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.